So the notes for today are looking at modeling trig functions. And a lot of the modeling trig functions are based on some practical examples and real world examples, but also one of the main ideas is that the x-axis scale is not going to be in terms of pi anymore. Okay, so typically we don't measure things in pi, we measure things in like seconds, 1 second, 2 seconds. So the the axes are going to be scaled. What that requires then is the b values are going to have a pi, because if we take a look at a period, okay, the period looks like this, and we don't want pi in our period, so typically the b will have to have some pi in the period. Okay, so our compression expansion factor will have to have pi. So let's do an example here. The minimax of a function are given as such. Okay, so we have at 0, 4, 8, 10, 18, something like that. We have our function here. Okay, there's our middle. Okay, again, we still need the same things. We need an amplitude. Okay, the amplitude is going to be a distance, so we're going to subtract. Okay, we're going to subtract and divide by 2. Okay, that's going to give us a amplitude. Okay, so we end up with the amplitude in this case works out to be, if I'm not mistaken, amplitude is 7. Okay, the vertical shift is going to be the vertical positioning, so we want the average of those two y positions. The average of those two y positions is 11. So we're going to end up with a y coordinate of 11 here, max of 18, minimum of 4. So we go up 7, down 7 to get to the minimax. Our period, okay, in this case, the distance from 0 to 10 is going to be half the period. So our period, we're just going to subtract. It's a distance, okay, so we're subtracting, and we're going to multiply that by 2. So our period is 20. Our b value then works out to be 2 pi over 20. Okay, now I can simplify that fraction. However, I think I've mentioned this before, that if we leave it in the 2 pi form, the period actually shows up in the denominator of that b value. Okay, so that's kind of ideal. I want that. It doesn't say what type of function I should use, so I'm just going to use cos. So my vertical horizontal shift, which is p, my horizontal shift is going to be equal to the x coordinate of the max. Okay, so there it is. So then I can write my equation as y equals 7 cosine 2 pi over 20 x minus 10 plus my middle position of 11. Okay, so there it is. So again, the main idea for today is we're going to start using this form of the b value, which shows the period in the denominator. Okay, so the generalization then is for b can be written as 2 pi over the period. It's actually the formula that we used before, but now this form shows a period. Okay, so the next problem here, the average value of the sine cosine function is at y equals 4. Okay, so that would be the middle, and the function hits the average value at x equals 2. Okay, so y equals 4 here. Okay, and at x equals 2, we'll put that there. There it's going to hit the middle. The maximum occurs at 5 and 7. Okay, so somewhere around here. Now that represents one quadrant. That's very important to recognize. We go from the middle or average value to the maximum. That's going to represent one quadrant. So we then need to figure out the rest of this problem. Okay, we need to figure out what are all the components. Amplitude, we want to know the middle, etc. Okay, so in this case here, since we can see that the amplitude is a distance from the middle to the top, we can just say, well, amplitude is 7 minus 4. Okay, so my amplitude works out to be 3. My vertical shift, okay, well, we already given the vertical shift at the average value is y equals 4. My period, the period of this function, well, the period is going to be a distance. So I'm going to find that distance. I know it's 3 units here. That only represents a quarter of the period. That's only one quadrant. So if I want the whole period, I'm going to multiply that by 4. And that's going to give me, yeah, that's another quadrant, a third quadrant, fourth quadrant. Okay, so that period then works out to be, what does that work out to be? Period is 12. Okay, my horizontal shift, I'm going to use cosine. And my horizontal shift is going to be equal to plus 5. I'm just going to use the maximum point again. So my equation then works out to be this. Y equals amplitude. I'm going to use a cosine function. Okay, since I have the choice, I'm going to write this as 2 pi over 12. So now, instead of calculating b, I'm just going to use a formula that I established up here. I'm just going to use it 2 pi over 12. I'm not going to simplify that expression because that keeps the period in the expression. Okay, and then I end up with a horizontal shift and my vertical shift. And there it is. Okay, so again, notice that I've used the period in the actual expression.